Band with the Runs by Tony Wilson. An everyday story of sex and drugs and folk and roll. What goes on tour stays between these sheets. No connection home. As he sat on top of the speakers, he had everything he would ever need for a band on tour. He had been in this place before, and he had felt the hazy, cold air of Ostend take his breath away so many times as he watched them loading the ferry in the distance. All around him there were neat stacks of amplifiers, his father's seaman's chest of clothes, labelled, metallic flight boxes with numbered and classified leads, microphone stands still with their price tags on, and his own immaculately polished cases that contained all of his flutes, whistles, Indian bansuri, bombards, bagpipes, panpipes and piccolos. He had everything you would need for a band on tour, except for a van and a band. Fox, to his friends and enemies, knew that he could rub people up the wrong way, but apparently this time he had gone too far. Sitting on the alphabetically arranged boxes, in his head, all he could hear were the last words of his former band. United in their mutiny, not 1 hour ago, they had stood on this very jetty as they unloaded his gear and cursed him as they threw it down on the ground. "You can take your tour and stuff it up your arse!" And that was one of the best ones. It wasn't as if it was his fault. The Balens Cross tour of Scandinavia had come to a somewhat abrupt and sour end when the Ross brothers, Declan, Finbar and Mikael, discovered that they weren't getting an equal cut of the takings. As far as Fox was concerned, he was doing them a favour. It wasn't as if they were getting that much work in the first place, and he, out of the goodness of his heart, had offered them a chance to tour for 5 weeks in the land of ice and fjords, and had given them the opportunity to make some money. The fact that they weren't getting an equal share of the money had come as a surprise to them, and an even bigger surprise to him when they confronted him with the facts. The pushing and shoving, slapping and pointing showdown by the marble pillars outside of Copenhagen Cathedral had been messy and very unpleasant for the people coming out of the feast for St. Clement. It hadn't been helped by the fact that everyone and anyone looking on at the scuffle understood every single word of abuse they were flinging at him. He knew by the time "You give cunts a bad name" arose to the surface, the odds of the current tour coming together were not looking good. It wasn't his fault, but to be honest, in his mind, it never was his fault. He was an entrepreneur, and he had made sure they were paid, fed and watered for all of the time that they were away. It was just the simple fact that he had got, or was going to get, 3 times as much as all of them put together. Details, for God's sake. I put the tour together. I was going to pay them for the use of their van, and I wasn't even going to charge them for the wear and tear on the PA system. They were given an opportunity to tour. They got money. What more did they want? It was only as he saw his steamy breath rising in front of his eyes that he realised he was talking to himself again. If he thought that he had a bad habit, which he didn't, it would be this talking out loud all of the time. If he hadn't spoken out loud and congratulated himself about how much they had really made on the last concert on the last day of the tour, he wouldn't be sitting here with everything he needed for a Dutch tour, except a van and a band and a bit more money. If nothing else, the Ross brothers had been fair. They hadn't been violent. They hadn't torn him a new arsehole, but they had recalculated their share of the money and left him with his fair share, a quarter. The silent journey back to Ostend with him, alone in the back with his PA and no windows, had been a time for him to reflect on his life. But the only conclusion he had come to was that he would have preferred physical violence to losing money. Weighing up his options, the idea of hiring a car which would cost money did not sit well with his wallet and made him feel sick. And anyway, where was he going to find a phone without leaving the equipment behind? The nearest campsite was a good 25 minutes walk away. Getting a taxi and trying to find somewhere to store his PA in Ostend would cost an arm and a leg. Having to splash out on a hotel and trying to get all of the stuff there by walking would be like pulling his teeth out. He was even starting to think about forming the boxes and speakers into some sort of shelter while he hoped for a miracle. "Hey, England boy!" The voice came from behind him as he watched the ferry and his chances of making even more money leave. At first, he thought it was his own voice, but there was no steam in the air. "Hey, England boy!" It was more insistent this time, and he swivelled on the speaker to see a pleasant-looking young man hanging out of the side of a bright red, beaten-up Ford pickup. "Hey, England boy! That was very entertaining. I was watching it all. I loved the bit when your friends, they threw your boxes out, and you had to line them up in alphabetical order. Very funny. Very funny. How you say that in English? You anal retentive horn." His laughter was high and warm, and he was smiling straight at this forlorn musician waif and stray by the side of the North Sea, and waving for him to come over. With nothing else to lose and nowhere else to go, Fox trudged towards this stranger, all the while thinking, Hun, that's rich coming from this Dutch git. "Hey, English boy, how the bastard hell you doing?" He was sporting a broad, cheeky grin as he watched Fox stumble over the uneven grass towards him. "I got a business proposition for you. You interested?" Interested? Fox broke into a full run at the thought of money.